So you've decided to buy a home in 2025. That is fantastic news. Congratulations. I mean, it's a hot market right now, I'm not going to lie, but it's fantastic news regardless. Now, whether this is your first home or your next big move or your second home, it doesn't really matter. Today, we're going to go into two of the most important topics that you do have to consider when you are buying a home. First of which is the house price itself. How much is this thing even going to cost? Even if it's an apartment, how much is it going to cost? And then secondly, where is it located? Is it on Earth? Is it on Mars? I don't know. You tell me. Let's get this. Now, of those two topics, which is the most important? Definitely home prices. Let me just tell you, you're going to be paying some big bucks. Especially in the last 3 years, home prices have gone through the roof, whether it's a house or a flat, it doesn't really matter. But as you're already aware, the value of a home varies differently based on a number of factors. Now, location is one of those important factors, as I previously mentioned, but some of the other things that do factor into the value of a home is market demand. Now, this is just pure economics, demand and supply. If there is a high demand for homes and there's a low supply, prices will go through the roof. But if there's a low demand and a high supply, then obviously prices will go down. Now, this matters a lot. Again, going back to the location, there are certain locations where there's a high demand for homes, but a really low supply. London being one of those locations. The other thing that most people don't tend to think about are national economic conditions. Now, architects, developers, investors generally will always think about these things, but for the general home buyer, the average Joe who's just looking to purchase a home for their family, this is not something that you historically needed to worry about. But in this day and age, especially in the last 3 years, it's absolutely something that you do need to worry about. What do I mean by that? Interest rates going up through the roof, basically since COVID, house prices absolutely skyrocketing, and even recently Keir Starmer announced a number of items in his new budget that do impact the general home buyer's potential. If you want more information about this, I've put a link in the description which will just summarize everything that you need to consider when it comes to buying a home in relation to that budget. But as I mentioned before, the average Joe historically never really considered national economic factors and how they impact their potential to buy a home. But these days, you absolutely have to. One of the other points I wanted to touch on is in terms of local development conditions. Now, I could split this into two aspects: existing local development conditions and future local development conditions. Existing local development conditions relate to everything that you can see: schools, train stations, amenities, etc. A good example of this is in the East London area, where we've recently had the extension of the Elizabeth line fully open and fully in use. As a consequence, house prices have obviously reacted, i.e. gone up, and developers have come into the area and built new infrastructure and new homes for the area. In terms of future development conditions, this can be summarized into something called a local development plan. So what's a local development plan? Well, think about it like a business plan that every local council is required to put together that sets out and outlines the principles for development for a period of about 10, 15, sometimes 20, sometimes even 30 years for any given area. My recommendation is that every home buyer Googles and researches the local development plan for the area that they're looking to buy in. It's just important for you to know what's coming in the next 5 years or 10 years. For example, are they going to build this train station in your backyard? Now, for some people, it's important to look at local development plans if you're looking to, move within the next 5 to 10 years thereabouts. But if you're someone who's buying a home for the next 20, 25, 30 years, then it might not really matter because you're going to be there regardless of whatever takes place in the area. But it's still useful for you to know what's coming. Now, this video is about house prices. So at the end of the day, in my opinion, those are probably 4 of the most important factors that you should consider when you're looking at the value and the price that you should be paying for a house in a given area. Interestingly, people always ask me, Paul, when do you think is the best time to buy a home? I'm like, I'm not a financial advisor, you get me. But in my opinion, the best time to buy a home is always now, which basically means as soon as possible. House prices in the last 30, 40 years have generally gone up. So regardless of these factors, the quicker you can buy a home, typically the better in the long run anyway. So the question is, well, how much should I be paying then for this home that I'm looking to buy? Very good question. Without digressing too far, there are a number of online tools that you can use today to help you determine the value and the average price that you should be expecting to pay for a home depending on the location. Now, as an architect and developer, I use a number of these tools, but one of the tools I want to recommend to you today is called the Prime Location Heat Map. Now, this is a free tool, freely accessible, that allows you to zoom into any location in the UK and determine the average price of that precise location. This heat map is also fantastic because of exactly that. It's a heat map, which means it shows a difference in price range between red, green and yellow. Green being the cheapest and red being the most expensive. So in central London, obviously you can expect it to be red entirely, and in places in the countryside you can expect it to be green. But interestingly, you realize that there's some parts of southeast London and, sort of the eastern part of London, for example, which are still in the green zone. And that's kind of where the sweet spot is. The useful thing about this heat map as well is that prime location are effectively a website that functions similar to Zoopla and Rightmove, which means you can go there, find a listing of homes, and obviously buy homes from there. It's like shopping for a house. They have access to all of this data, and they use that data to feed this heat map, which means it gets updated on a fairly regular basis. One of the things I like to tell people about this heat map is that at the end of the day, it only shows the average price, which means a house, for example, a 3-bedroom house could cost anywhere between 400 to 500,000 in an area, but a 2-bedroom apartment in that same area could cost anywhere around 300,000 to maybe 400,000. So that's about 150,000 pounds difference in the same area, but the prime location heat map does not quite recognize that nuance. It just gives you an average price. So it's up to you then, obviously, to look at that and look at what the range will be. And if it's an apartment, maybe, reduce it by 100,000, for example. Personally, I'm based in London, so I'm only really ever interested in home prices in London. But at the end of the day, I can use this tool to look all around the UK. I can go to Leeds, look at what the prices are. I can go to Birmingham, look at what the kind of prices are, even though typically they're cheaper than obviously London, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, Edinburgh. I don't know about Edinburgh, it's too cold, but you know what I mean. I can go all the way there and look at what the house prices are and then take it from there. So why is this important? Well, knowing the value of homes in a given area can really, really go a long way to helping you manage your expectations. You have to remember, when you're buying a home, you're basically entering a bidding war. You might find a home on Rightmove and get all excited about it, only for you to find out 4 days later that there's 20 viewings and there are 8 offers on the table, and your offer is one of those. I know this because that's happened to me. And yeah, it's a bit crazy out there. So it's very, very easy for you to get carried away when you're buying a home. But as long as you keep in mind what the average prices should be in that area, hopefully that will give you the best position to place a bid and hopefully get your offer accepted on the home. Naturally, these things will ultimately factor in your affordability, your mortgage application, and how much you can actually pay on a monthly basis. And on that note, in the next video, what I'm going to do is break down the affordability criteria, how mortgage brokers see it, how you should see it for yourself in terms of determining your budget, and finally how this breaks down into financial requirements and financial contributions to the home. At the end of the day, you have to remember, I'm not a financial advisor, but I hope this information is useful. To be honest, if you just want some general advice on what to do next and how to go about buying a home, by all means drop me a message and let's have a conversation. My name is Paul, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.